Greetings, my name is JC,
And I'm Ian.
and this is the Gamer's Gaiden. In this episode, we're going to be talking about AAA games and indie games. But before we get into those topics, Ian, what have you been playing this week?
It's been a really busy week for me,
Yeah.
so I haven't had a chance to play as much gaming as I would like to. I apologize to JC. We just got back from a convention in
Cool.
Toronto. Um, my wife's a tattooer, and it was a whole weekend of tattooing. So if I smell horrible, that's because I rolled here straight from that convention.
You're
So
fine.
I apologize, JC. This is what you get to deal with. But I did find some time to play some stuff. A little bit earlier in the week, I continued on my journey through Final Fantasy VII.
Awesome. What part are you at now?
I am just about to take a rocket into space.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, I purposely held off because I know I'm totally going to screw up the combination section, and I wanted to have some kind of walkthrough with me when I did it. And I just knew I wasn't going to have the time over the weekend to have both of those things available.
Yeah, I remember that and the button press in the where you got to press the button at the
Like
same
right
time.
at the beginning?
Right at the
Yeah,
beginning.
that's a
Those were the
giant
two.
pain.
Yeah. Like, why is this a thing?
But
Mini games.
I did pick up two little things that I had two things that I actually had more success with.
Okay.
So the first was Let's Go Pokemon, or no, Pokemon Let's Go Eevee,
Awesome. Okay, that's the one that I got.
which
How are you enjoying that?
uh, so I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It is fun. It's a very entertaining Pokemon experience. I do have some issues with it though. I really wish that they would have at least left battles in.
Right.
Like, I wish I could have my Pokemon battle random Pokemon instead of using the catch mechanics to gain experience. That really bugs me.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about that too, but they did a lot of advertising to show that it was like a lot more casual players,
Yeah,
especially
like,
the Let's Go people.
I get that it's
Yeah.
not for me.
And if they would have released that, then it would have been the Pokemon game we're getting like next year or something. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, I understand that the game wasn't for me specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I picked it up on sale. That was 100% the reason why I picked it up.
Oh, okay.
If it wasn't, I think it was $50
Yeah,
instead
something like that.
of 80.
Mm-hmm.
So if it wasn't on sale, I wouldn't have grabbed it because it didn't. I had an idea that that was the case going in,
Right.
and I knew that that was gonna bug me. Plus, I didn't like that they changed some of the like HM moves.
Oh, they made them more simpler. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that they made them more simpler and that they're just a thing, but I
And you
hate that they
can.
changed the names
Oh, okay. I see. But
so
I think
that
they've changed over the years too. They're not like the original one was just like HM01, for example. But
it was still cut, surf, strength,
mhm.
flash, all of those things, and now
Yeah.
you have like slice through
Hmm.
and like I think it's like surf is not what it is. Strength is strong push.
Yeah.
Like it's
The, the
those little things that really bugged me.
the big difference is that you can like just use them willy nilly. It doesn't really matter in this version.
Yeah, like you don't have to
That's
you
one of
don't
the
have
big
to put it
differences.
on a Pokemon. You can just use it.
Hmm.
And I did like that surf lets you ride a surfboard.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of cool,
Hmm.
even though it's not surf.
Yeah,
But yeah, no. So that's been okay, and that was great this weekend because it was something that I could be playing for 5 minutes
it's a very mindless game.
and then just shut off
Yeah.
without any kind of like I could just put it down and talk to somebody about
Hmm.
whatever it was. And at night, before I went to bed, I picked up a little game called American Fugitive.
Okay. Yep. That's what you told
That's
me
what
it
I
was.
wrote down, American Fugitive, on the Switch.
Okay. Cool. What kind of game is this?
It is a throwback to classic Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So you have, it's a sandbox, but
Hmm.
it's that top down. It is a crime story, but it's kind of set in more of like a rural setting.
Oh, okay.
So you're not in a huge city,
Right.
but the story is interesting
So
enough.
you're kind of like in suburbia versus downtown.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like there's it's a little bit more country, but there are still a lot of the fun mechanics that you had in the original Grand Theft Auto games.
Right.
Like a tow truck can tow stuff.
Oh,
You
okay, cool.
um you do need a like a I guess a solid object to
Right.
break into things.
Oh,
So if
okay.
you're
Like you need
breaking
like a rock to throw through a window.
Yeah, like if you were gonna break into a house,
Mm-hmm.
like if you want to go in through the window, you need a rock or a brick,
Right.
or like a lead pipe or something like that.
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
with a car. If you want to break in through the window, you need something to break the
You
window.
just don't open the door and get in.
Exactly, and
The
you've
guy
got
goes,
an
"Fuck."
inventory. If you're running around and the police catch you doing something shady,
Right.
you can actually change your clothes,
Oh, okay.
and
Oh, so it's
that
kind of
will
like the
help
spray paint
you.
mechanic. You just
Yeah,
change your looks instead. That's kind of cool.
exactly. So I kind of dug that. And I also sort of dug that you can also wear a dress if you really want to.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to, it's whatever happens to be hanging on the clothesline that you run past.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I go into the clothes store and I buy the green shirt this
Mm-hmm.
time. There's just, you'll run past a house and in the backyard, you see that clothesline hanging up. And
Yoink.
who knows? It could be 4 dresses hanging on there. It could be, a couple different shirt and pant combos.
Got to do what you got to do.
Exactly, man. But no, it's neat. It's got there's stat progression, like unlockable abilities.
Oh, okay. So mini RPG aspects to it.
Yeah, just a little bit. But I mean, I've only put a handful of hours in on it because I only really got to play it at night. It was a
Right.
little bit too intense
Mm-hmm.
to play while I was out on the show floor.
This is
So
on the Switch as well. Okay,
yes,
cool.
yeah. It's pretty good. I've been enjoying it so far. But anyways, that is it for me. JC, what have you been doing? How's your elo?
Uh, so yeah, a little
You
bit of
still
the story.
gold?
I'm still gold. So I was a little bit, I'll be honest, I was a little bit nervous to go into ranked. So
Oh,
I actually
absolutely.
hadn't played most of the week any ranked. So I switched over to flex queue with my friends, and let's just say the team minted a lot, and the win rate kind of plummeted in flex queue. So
So
that sucked.
do you see a huge difference now in the caliber of play that you're getting matched up against, even in flex queue, now
Yeah.
that you're at gold?
Certainly, yeah. Because like most of my matches at Silver One, there'd be like maybe 1 to 3 silver players,
Okay.
and then most of them would be golds, and some of them would be like gold one and promos sometimes.
Yeah.
So they'd be basically a platinum player. And whenever I switch over to Flex Q, at this elo, it basically was almost all golds, regardless of most of my friends being silver and some of them being bronze. It would just throw us against an entire gold
No hate
team.
against the bronze people.
No, no hate against the bronze people, only them irons. But it's easy to get out of iron, trust me. But yeah, uh the flex queue basically sometimes it throws in like platinum players, and a lot of my friends, to say it lightly, can't handle platinum players.
That's fair.
So if they're like, I don't know, just jungle versus jungle, like even I have trouble, like obviously, like I'm not used to playing them, and it's that much larger of a step for some people. So yeah, it just makes it a little harder. I think maybe once I get into higher influx, then it'll kind of fix that problem. But until then, it'll be a little bit of a struggle. I think I did some flex games by myself, and it kind of regulated the elo a little bit.
Okay.
But where I was like basically playing with silver gold teams, and then every now and then it would like throw in a plat person because they were doing with somebody. But that's the major problem, is that like their flex MMR is different than their solo queue MMR. So then they're queuing in with like their diamond friend, and like I have a friend who's diamond, and I've queued him with him in normies, and yeah, he just like he stomps all over the opposing laner. Like it's just
Yeah.
going to happen unless it's a bad matchup where their entire team kind of like counters the champions that he plays. That's basically what's going to happen, right? But and you have bad games. Everybody does. But yeah. So the reason why we're trying to play more flex queue is because Clash is apparently coming back.
Okay.
So they've restarted development on that. It sounds like from scratch. I don't really understand if it's that they're continuing it or if they've just started over, but they've said that they might be more testing phases later, like late summer, early fall, or something like that. But they didn't say which regions. I know that the last region that they did a test bed in was in EU. And they did a dev blog on the state of Clash and stuff like that to give us more information on it. So we were kind of pumped about that. So we are like, oh, let's play Flex and like get better together so that we can synergize more and stuff like that. But it didn't go over well. But I did play 2 ranked games in solo queue. Loading in by myself, and the first game I didn't do very well, and I lost, and I was like, "Uh-oh, I'm gonna lose gold." But then I played again, and I actually ended up doing fairly well, and our team did fairly well. We had a really great mid laner who was a Pike.
Okay,
And
weird, but
he was
okay.
yeah, Pike is a good flex pick right now with top mid and support,
Wow.
especially with the LEC and the MSI finals. Like, that was used a lot by like G2, and some teams and some NA teams are starting to pick that type of stuff up.
Interesting. Okay.
Apparently, I think I've heard some of the academy teams are doing it as well, because they tend to do more skirmishy type teams and risk averse. They're less risk averse and stuff like that. But yeah, he was a pretty good shot caller, getting everybody on the same page and stuff like that, and we ended up winning it. So I'm sitting at 20 elo.
Nice.
So yeah, 20 out of one game isn't bad. So if I keep on playing, hopefully I can get to. I've set up my gold. My sub gold is to hit gold 2, and according to Mobalytics, I might be able to get platinum if I try. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted.
Keep working, buddy.
Yeah. The second game that I played, so this came out earlier in May, and I purposely didn't play it because I was on my road to gold and kind of hyper focusing on that. But as people who've watched the series know, I'm really big into Life is Strange. Episode 3 for season 2 came out about a month ago now, at the beginning of May. So I hadn't played it until like Tuesday or something like that, and it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. And yeah, so I played that, and holy shit, I won't go into it, but if you've played it, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. I had a theory, and that theory was like, I think the game is gonna do this near the end of it. Apparently, I was totally wrong. It's gonna do that totally at the beginning, and there was like that after scene 30-second clip or 10-second clip, like what's in the next episode, and it was like, oh, that's what they're doing with it, and it kind of totally shocked me. I know you saw my Facebook post, and I was just like, fuck, what the hell? Like,
Yeah.
it was like 2 a.m. in the morning whenever I beat the episode, and I was just like pulling out my hair. It was like, what the hell just happened? And 85% of the people chose the exact same thing that I did, and I was like, really? Are you fucking kidding me?
That's
Yeah,
yeah. Wow.
yeah. It was the big decision, or the big climax of the episode was uh pretty much like almost everybody did the same thing. There were some things earlier in the episode that were pretty like big decisions that were more 50-50, that I think is more attuned to like Before the Storm and Life is Strange the first season. But yeah, it was really really interesting looking at the results of the episode, because I'm really enjoying it so far, and now I've got to wait until August to play the fourth episode. So just sitting here waiting. I guess I'll just play more League in the meantime. Yeah. And after I played Life is Strange, I played over the course of 3 days. I think it was the Wednesday to the Friday. I played a game that you mentioned, which I mentioned that I didn't know what it was. And then a couple days later, I was like, wait,
Then you had it.
I have an email from Amazon telling me that my pre orders shipped. So I did know what it was. The game I'm talking about is A Plague Tale Innocence. Yeah, because I remember whenever I got the email, I re-looked at the trailer because we had talked about it, and then I got this like the day after you had talked about it. I was like, oh yeah, I really wanted to play that game. So this game is really really interesting. It's a story-driven game where there's basically action adventure, kind of like Uncharted, or its closest parallel is probably actually The Last of Us,
Okay.
where it's just a action adventure, less action, more adventure, linear like story that they're telling. And I really enjoyed it. It was actually really really good. The characters were surprisingly well acted, and had pretty good uh, development. The game over the course of the chapters, which is divided into 16, and then there's like a epilogue 17th chapter,
Okay.
which you just move the character around and some things happen. It's very short. Some of them are shorter than others, but there's a roster of brother and sister, and you're part of a noble family, and basically your family is attacked by the Inquisition, and you escape with your life, and you're trying to get to find help. So from there, you meet more and more characters, and you actually learn more and more things about like the plague that's going on and the Inquisition, and people are searching for you because there's some weird like there's some fantasism about it where it's like some of it's kind of realistic and some of it's absolutely not,
Yeah.
because the numbers of rats, for example, are like hordes and hordes and hordes of rats, which is surprising that the PlayStation could handle that many of them, because like you can tell that they're not like a mob of like one polygon. They're a bunch of different actual individual rats by the way that they interact. Because like you'll notice that they'll like one line of them will see where you are, and then they'll go towards you, and then like they'll come at you in basically waves and then swarm you basically, unless you can get a fire started or something like that. But yeah, it's a lot of sneaking, solving puzzles. The puzzles aren't overly difficult, and there's some combat. You have a sling in the game basically, and there's some aspects where you can choose just to be stealth, but eventually there are some places where you kind of are forced to use combat. I think it would have been a little bit cooler if you could have used stealth through the whole entire game, but then it wouldn't have made sense with where the story kind of goes. And yeah, there's just some really great interactions. I think my favorite one, which isn't too much of a spoiler, but like you kill somebody fairly early in the game because you're trying to save your brother, and the reaction of the sister is pretty priceless because she doesn't mean to kill the person, and she's shocked by it, and she's like, "Oh, I didn't mean to," but the person's dead, right? And then the brother all of a sudden cries out, and then she kind of like gets to her senses and then continues like running after her brother. And I thought that scene was really, really well done because it kind of showed the emotion of like, I think she's 15 or something. It's like a 15-year-old just protecting family and like inadvertently or overtly killing somebody, and it's just like the ramifications of that. And if you kill more people in the game, it actually comes up later because some of the dialogue in the game are just like, holy crap, like, do you need to be killing these people? And then because I kind of got to the point where I was just like, no, I'm going to throw slings at these people. It's a lot easier. And the reaction of her was basically to how I was playing her, which I thought was kind of neat. Where she was basically just like oh, don't worry about it. Basically, like I've got this, and this is kind of normal, I guess. But
Yeah,
you,
it normalizes what she's doing to her,
yeah,
which is something that a person would probably do over time.
yeah. And then there's a dream episode later where it comes up and it haunts her, basically, which I thought was a really good full circle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Kind
So,
of like that the one of the bosses in Metal Gear Snake Eater,
oh, okay,
where if you killed so many people up to that point in the game,
right.
every one of their ghosts
Yeah, it's pretty much the
comes
same
and messes
thing.
with you.
You're
Whereas if you'd not done that,
yeah.
you
The that was probably one of my top three moments in the game where the dream sequence, because you're chasing your brother, and it becomes obvious that it's a dream after the first scene transition because you go to different parts of the game that you've been at, and it's like
okay.
you're running through, and all of a sudden you open a door and it's a new area or something like that, and you get into a tunnel, and then there's all these people basically who were the people who you've killed, and I'm assuming that that tunnel, it's like a sewer. Um, that sewer with all the dead bodies would be more or less depending on how many people you killed.
That's really
So
interesting.
yeah, I thought it was really cool because they're basically calling out to her like, "Why did you kill me?" Because there's some people who you can save, and then some people who you can't. I saw some achievements where it's like you saved this English soldier, and like you saved this person and stuff like that, and you can choose to do that, or but it's kind of like a puzzle as well as to how you save it. Like I tried to save the one you're French in the game, and the
Yeah.
English are attacking. And there was a part where I tried to save the English soldier because I'm like, I may as well try, but then I got too close, and the rats were coming away from my fire closer to the soldier, and then they devoured the person, and it's like, oh damn, that didn't work. I thought I was gonna be able to like hit something on a different angle, but I got too close. But I stuck with my decisions. So yeah, The one complaint I would have about the game to finish this off would actually be the scale of difficulty. So it kind of had like a scaling difficulty where like some parts are a little bit more difficult and some parts are easier, and it kind of had its own set tone of difficulty. And eventually there was a few key moments where the combat is forced, and it made sense due to the story why the combat is forced. But basically, you had to have perfect momentum and rhythm. Otherwise, if anybody gets close to you or one of the characters, they pretty much auto kill them.
Hmm.
There's some cases where if you have a specific item, you can use the item, but then you could get like shot by an arrow or like a pike or something like that. And those specific parts were just much more difficult than the actual game itself. That I found it kind of odd, and it kind of broke the immersion to me because it was so much more difficult. Where I actually had to try it like 3 or 4 times to succeed at it, and there's only 2 or 3 instances where that happened. And get good, whatever. But the thing is that I just felt it odd because it was just that much more difficult than most of the game up until that point. It didn't even progress to that difficulty. It was just like it's normally around here, and all of a sudden it was up here. It
Mm.
wasn't that much more difficult, but it was just significant enough to be like, oh, I'm not used to having to be this fast at throwing slings and stuff like that to kill these 4 people who are chasing me, for example.
Yeah, it
Um,
didn't ramp up to it. It was just
yeah,
like whoop.
this one scene is going to be very, very hard, so I had to
Yeah.
try it like 3 or 4 times to do it. Yeah.
So, what would you say your kind of like final verdict on it is? Like, would it be kind of a buy, maybe a buy it on sale?
I would say that if you like action adventure games and you're on the fence about it, about what you've heard and what you've seen, wait until it's on sale. But if you really like games like Uncharted or Tomb Raider or The Last of Us, adventure style games like that, and story driven games, it's only $50. I would go ahead and pick it up.
That's not bad.
Yeah, yeah, it's a double A game, so to speak, in my opinion, and yeah, it's the story is well worth it. The graphics are fantastic.
What was the kind of total length on it for you?
I think it was just shy of 10 hours. It might
That's
have
not
been
bad.
like 8 to 10 or something like that.
And you said that there was still some additional achievements you could have gone back
Yeah, so there's a chapter
and
select
snagged
mode,
if you wanted.
and there's collectibles. So there's
Okay.
flowers you can collect, and there's artifacts that you can collect. I think yeah, and so I think you can just redo a chapter to be able to redo them to get
Okay.
all the achievements. So it shouldn't be that difficult if you wanted to go through it and find them all.
But even still, that could add an extra, an
Yeah,
extra five
a second
hours or
playthrough or
so.
something like that, unless you
So,
find everything in your first playthrough, which potentially could be possible. But I was just more immersed in the story and the gameplay to actually it didn't feel warranted to me to actually like go off to the side and try and find all these flowers and stuff like
hey,
that.
that's a
But
solid compliment to the game itself, right?
yeah, yeah, those types of games generally, whenever I get into the story and I want to see more of it, I generally forget about all the outside collectathons and stuff like that.
Sort of.
Yeah, but yeah, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. I would definitely give that one a thumbs up. So today's segment is AAA and indie games. We're going to talk about AAA games first, and then go into AAA games. Or sorry, AAA games first, and then go into indie games. But before we do that, we're going to kind of give a rough definition of what we mean by both of those genres.
Yeah, even we had kind of differing thoughts
Yeah,
on sort of what makes a AAA game versus what makes an indie.
yeah, because it's not always necessarily the number of developers and the cost of the game, but that definitely is a very good indicator as to whether or not it's a AAA game.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, both of them have always been kind of it sort of an easy comparison to like the film industry,
Hmm.
where you have your AAA game, which would kind of equate to like a summer blockbuster, or like your easy bet. That's your Call of Duty and your Battlefield are your Fast and the Furious or
Yeah.
Transformers or
Pretty
I
much major studio involvement from like EA, Activision, Ubisoft, Rockstar, Blizzard,
exactly
Square.
like they're like tentpole franchises.
Yeah.
They're what's holding up these studios
Hmm. And indie games?
and indies. They've always again more like the independent films where they will take more risks. They will tell more. They'll tell the stories that the AAA studios won't tell.
Yeah, and they seem
Um,
to like diverge away from in the most cases, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, like an indie, you're way more likely to find a female lead character,
Hmm.
whereas that's not something that you typically see in the
Yeah.
AAA games.
Whereas, like in the AAA games, a lot of the times where you do see a female character, it's because you had the choice of selecting male or female, for example, and
Exactly.
it's a model swap, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I mean, gender in video games is for sure a topic that we'll talk about later.
Hmm.
I'm not going to get super into that right now,
Yeah.
but the indies again are just something more to me. They're always something that was a little bit more likely to tell a story that you wouldn't necessarily see at a AAA level.
Yeah.
You've got things like Gone Home,
Hmm.
where you've got the uh, the love story, non-conventional love story. We'll go with that. Or I mean, even beyond that, you have things like the Stanley Parable, which is
Yep.
a walking simulator that you have the narrator telling you what to do and then complaining that you're not following. Like there's so much amazing dialogue in that,
Yeah.
which you wouldn't find in a AAA title.
Yeah, because like generally these games don't cost 90 or 120 bucks.
No.
And what I find that we'll go into a little bit later is that they seem to hyper focus on one or two things and excel at those things instead of doing a lot of the different aspects
Because you, you
well.
you tend to find that an independent release is really a labor of love
Yeah, for
for a
sure.
handful of people.
Hmm.
Whereas yes, a AAA title might have just as much love in it, but when you have a team of like hundreds of people,
Hmm.
you're gonna have guys who are just like we're just there for the paycheck.
Yep.
When you've got 10 dudes
Or
who
even
don't
two.
who aren't getting a paycheck,
Yeah.
they're 100% doing this because they love it, because they love this idea and this concept. They want to tell this story,
Hmm.
or they want to deliver
A
this
game
product.
concept or
Yeah,
like a Super Meat Boy is
yeah,
just really they love that style of game, that game mechanic, and it's a labor of love for them where they made a game based off of the games that they like, and they took that and ran with it and made it very difficult.
yeah, incredibly difficult, but it's so much fun. Whereas, um, you know, FIFA 19,
Yeah,
they're not doing it because they love it. They're doing it because someone
pays the
said
bills.
make FIFA 19.
Yep, and put tons of monetization in it because it's gonna sell.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So let's get into it. So first we're gonna go over AAA stuff. So let's go into why AAA games are good for the industry. So it's easily consumed by the masses, and it gives players content is our first point. And basically what we mean by that is because people themselves, not just necessarily the companies, are fairly risk averse, where they know what they like, and they like Call of Duty, for example,
Yeah.
and they will play the next one and the next one, or they like NHL and they'll play the next one and the next one, and they know what they're getting, and they know what they like.
Yeah, you know what you're signing up for. Again, it's so for me, it feels so easy to compare these to the film
Mm-hmm.
industry because you know that if you're going to see, Fast and the Furious 47,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to see cars, probably explosions. Um,
Yeah.
that you know what you're signing up for. There's generally not a ton of surprise.
Yeah,
You
past
know,
the first initial one, there's basically a formulaic um, consistency that it develops, and exactly to what you said.
and like to some degree, you even get transcendence beyond the franchises themselves. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, at this point, you almost know if you're buying a Ubisoft like flagship title,
Yep.
like an Assassin's Creed or a Far Cry or even the Ghost Recon stuff. Now,
Hmm.
you're getting a sandbox
Yep.
that is gonna have tons of distraction,
Hmm.
um, a a main quest that's probably gonna be, or a main storyline, I should say, it's probably around like 10 to 20 hours
Yeah,
long.
that part's generally short because like Skyrim, the main storyline's like probably 15 to 20 hours, and the game is hundreds of hours. Like,
Yeah, and that's that Ubisoft tends to be delivering at this point a sandbox loaded with distractions.
yeah, and it's what people are trending to, right? And that's
Exactly.
what those AAA companies are are creating so that people can consume it, basically.
Yeah, and buying a Call of Duty game, you're primarily buying it because you want the online aspect.
Hmm.
Um, the nice thing I like at this point is if you're buying a Battlefield game, you actually know you're making that decision knowing you're going to get more single player content, which is an odd concept coming from EA.
Yeah.
But again, that's you know what you're signing up for with these games. You
Hmm.
know you most likely aren't gonna get something that is gonna be garbage.
Yep.
You do, I mean,
There are some cases where you are getting garbage.
yeah,
Yep.
you're gonna get a 50% occasionally. Yeah, I can just see you putting in the graphic right now. But yeah, like it it's at least gonna be a 50
Yeah.
generally.
Hmm.
Like it's going to be a passable product. It's going to be exciting
Yeah.
for at least a handful of hours,
For sure.
and you're going to move on.
Yep. And since these games make so much money, it allows these companies to actually take risks. That's kind of contradictory to what a lot of people think, but it does, because they do allow their subsidiary companies that make the AA games, or smaller AAA games, uh, potentially make games that would potentially be a loss. And some examples of that are EA Games making Titanfall and Mirror's Edge,
Yeah, like
right?
Mirror's Edge was a real weird concept,
Hmm.
and then you get something like Titanfall, and even Titanfall 2, I would argue, is not a a major like that's a
Yeah.
double A
Yeah,
title.
exactly. And that, since this company has been able to basically bankroll by making AAA games, they can make these AA games, right?
And
So,
what's fascinating now too, on top of that, is you have this studio,
mhm.
Respawn, for the Titanfall games,
Yep.
who I mean they did Apex Legends, which blew up for
Yeah.
at least a few months.
Yeah, now it's coming down in the trends from the current news that I've been following, but
But even
it might
still,
bounce
like
back.
you've now got this studio, and like Respawn is actually going to be delivering what I think is going to be one of the biggest AAA titles of this year, the Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
really hope that game's going to be good.
yeah, fingers crossed. But yeah, they've whereas they have worked on these slightly more obscure titles.
Yep.
I mean, it's still a shooter, but it's definitely a shooter with an odd mechanic.
Hmm.
It's not your typical run and gun kind of deal.
Yeah.
And now you're gonna have this really fascinating Star Wars experience coming from the studio. Like that,
Hmm.
Star Wars is a huge license for them,
Yep.
and to see them put that in their hands
Yeah.
is just fascinating. I mean, they bought Dice
Yeah.
from Mirror's Edge,
Hmm.
which I mean, they closed Dice,
That's still around.
but they yeah, like the original Mirror's Edge was just so out there
Hmm.
as a concept. A first person game that is like a first person platformer
Yep.
where combat is totally downplayed. The
Hmm.
option was there. I mean, we talked about this a lot earlier in first person games that are not your typical first person games, but
Yeah.
still, like this is them releasing, um, you know, NFL or I guess Madden, NHL, and FIFA
Hmm.
on a yearly basis allows them the opportunity to say,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, sure, well, here's your publishing money.
Hmm.
This game looks cool.
Yeah.
Let's see if it actually sells.
Yep.
And in these cases it did, and it ended up being quite profitable for them.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Life is Strange exists, is because Square Enix actually published the game, and the first and second season, and well, the third one, before the Storm 2, but and yeah, the developer, being a small company, actually got like a AAA company to help publish them, and since Square makes Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior and all these games that sell thousands and thousands and sometimes millions of copies,
Yeah.
right? It allows them to do stuff like that, which is pretty cool. Um, but going into our next point, the larger companies that make the larger games have now gotten into publishing, which is kind of what we got into our second
Yeah, that's what we were just
example.
kind of touching on there.
Yes, transitioning to that. The second example of this is that these large companies that are publishing these smaller companies' games, Quantum Dream is another example.
Yeah,
Life is Strange was their first one, and I guess Vampire would be another one, and anything done by Don't Nod. But Quantic Dream is another great example of that, where it's not owned by Sony, but it's published by them, and it's exclusive. So it's kind of like what we used to call a second party, but or what I used to call second party. But yeah, and they've made really great games, and they're well polished and stuff like that. But like they're not necessarily I guess they do have fairly big budgets, but like it's because of their publisher, right?
yeah,
So
exactly. And the neat thing is that it actually lets the developer
hmm
stick to their concept.
yeah, yeah,
Because
because
that is something that we did mention a little bit earlier, is that you don't tend to see a lot of like female leads in video games,
yeah,
and you get a company like Don't Nod with Life is Strange, who are like, no, this is a story that we want to tell. We don't want Max to be a dude.
yeah, which was a huge problem for them because they went to other publishers first, and a lot of them said, okay, sure, but switch Max to being a male,
Yeah,
and they were like, no, we're gonna find somebody else.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, like, if they didn't find that studio, we
hmm
might not have got the story
Yep.
the way that they wanted to tell it,
Yeah, it would
or
have been
we may have
censored.
just not gotten the story. Period.
Yeah, which would have been tragedy.
If they wanted to stick to their vision, yeah, and that's, I mean,
That multiverse can stay away from this message.
but no, like that could be an experience that we missed out on completely, if Square didn't have the bankroll to be like, yeah, all right, take this chance,
hmm
and you didn't have the strong independent developer to be like, this is my vision and
Yep.
this is the story I want to tell.
hmm
So I mean, that's a real cool thing where you get the two coming together like that. You
Yeah.
have something that is more independent, but you also have the bankroll of these huge
Yeah.
publishers.
And noting on bankroll, because these large companies have that amount of money, there is some cases where they actually release like a AAA game, and it doesn't do that well, and they actually are able to fix their mistakes.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna take my hand away because that's a non-fixed mistake.
Fair enough.
That I'm sure it was gonna be right.
Yeah.
Right here. Right here.
But
Mistake for sure.
yeah.
Not fixed.
But maybe one day.
Probably not.
I don't care at this point. But Final Fantasy 14 and Destiny are two prime examples of this, because Final Fantasy 14 was not well received whenever it first came out.
No, and
And
up until you got what is it, Realm Reborn,
Yeah.
which ended up being fantastic.
Yeah. A lot of people love that game.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, like the changes, the game looked fantastic in comparison to what it originally was released. Because I remember
Yeah.
I used to play Final Fantasy 11
Yep,
back
me
in
too.
high school, and I was thinking about playing Final Fantasy 14 because I was like, maybe I'll play another MMO and break my no more MMO rule. But I looked at it and I'm just like, this sucks. And then once A Realm Reborn came out, it was like, yeah, okay, this is actually pretty cool that they've turned this around. Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and like I played A Realm Reborn, and it was a lot of fun. I had quite a bit of fun with that. Actually, I played it on PC and console as well.
hmm
And what's really neat is that it transitioned well between the two.
Right.
I could play my character just as easily on console as I could on PC.
That was a
So
cool thing about 11 as well.
the switch between the controller and the keyboard
hmm
was great. I found the transition between the two on 11
hmm
not as good.
Okay.
'Cause
Because
I-
you played 11 on the console, right?
I played 11 on the console, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Actually, I played it on the PS2, and then I played it when it was re-released on the 360.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I played it on both. 360 was my favorite because it had the voice chat.
Oh, okay.
But that was separate. Like, it wasn't part. It
Yeah.
wasn't integrated into the game. It was just part of the like party
Xbox
chat
Live,
that they had.
yeah.
Yeah. But Destiny was a big one because I
You played
played
the first.
Destiny
You
when it
played both of
first
them,
came
right?
out,
Yeah.
and I was just so unimpressed. Um, I was super hyped because I was a Halo fan, and then I played it, and I'm like, this is meh,
Yeah, it's just the
y- you
okay
know,
parts of Halo.
and then you had like Dinklage Bot leading you around with
Hmm.
the driest
That was the
dialogue.
second one, right?
That was the
Yeah.
first one.
Oh, it was the first one.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
I know.
know,
I played Destiny 2. I've seen Destiny 1, but I didn't play Destiny 2 until like a couple of patches
well,
were released.
what was neat was that as they released new content for the original Destiny,
Hmm.
they actually changed a whole bunch of things, and they really pushed the game forward. So we actually ended up getting Destiny 2,
Right.
which in my opinion was just like miles better than the original Destiny. Right at launch, like right at launch, you had a game that was playable and fun,
Right.
and even a decent story. Like I played through Destiny 2 all the way to like a completion
Hmm.
when it was launched,
Yeah.
and I enjoyed it. The story
Yeah.
was the story was fun. I had a good time with the content and the quests and everything.
Hmm.
I did go back and do some of the like end game content,
Right.
but I mean I wasn't looking for an MMO to get into, so I
Yeah.
didn't go head first into it. But I found I had enough fun with the game itself
Hmm.
to get my price of admission out of it,
Yeah.
and we would never have gotten to that point if they never fixed
All the issues.
in the very first Destiny.
Hmm. Which I'm really glad for because I played Destiny 2 and I really enjoyed playing through the campaign of it. And I did
Yeah.
a little bit of the extra content after the campaign with some other events and things. But yeah, I found the game actually really, really fun. It was cool. I'm glad that they fixed the second one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, another aspect of why we like AAA games is many of the developers that work with these AAA companies gain a lot of very core and useful experience, and then they branch out to create their own content. And a couple examples of this is a game that's coming out by Artplay by Koji from the Castlevania series with Bloodstained,
Yep.
which is cool because that was indie game that is published by a larger company, and it's kickstarted and backed by fans,
Yep.
and yeah, and it's a pretty cool thing, and even a lot earlier in history, where from the same company, ironically, Konami, a lot of the developers didn't necessarily like how they were forced to do certain things in certain ways with Konami, and they left and they made a very popular company called Treasure. If you've never heard of them and you like running gun games, check them out. But yeah, there's another example of a handful of developers just packing up and leaving and starting their own company. People at BioWare have done it. They
Yep.
left and they've created a new company. Some of them now work for Beamdog, and like some of them work for Obsidian Entertainment, and the
Well,
original.
even way back, you had your core team at LucasArts,
Yeah.
and most of them have broken off. I mean, like Tim Schafer has done incredibly well for himself
Mm-hmm.
with Double Fine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Double Fine is arguably like at least a double A studio at this point.
Yeah.
They
Yeah, because they can take all their experiences where they've worked on all this really high budget stuff, and they know all the processes and stuff that like expectations and stuff, and they can take that knowledge and then like teach their small teams on how to do it and decide where to sort of like emphasize more effort on and less effort on certain things. And
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. You get people who still have a story that they want to tell, and they
Mm-hmm.
actually have the contacts, the skill sets to deliver that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like I that's why I'm incredibly interested to see what happens with Death Stranding,
Mm-hmm.
because you have an actual like a very visionary person
Yeah.
like Hideo Kojima
Yep.
who's now essentially unleashed.
Yeah, he's unleashed for sure.
And I mean, everything we've seen, I mean,
I mean, fanboys are just gonna love it anyway. But like,
last week, yeah,
yep,
getting
they got
an
the 10-minute
8-minute
trailer. Yeah.
trailer for a video game. That is almost unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Typically you get
What's
a
funny about
2
that
to 3
trailer
minute
is
trailer.
like I still don't understand anything about the story.
No, the
It was
story's
supposed to explain something, and I get it's Kojima, and we're not gonna understand even after we play it, maybe.
but it was again like this. You get this crazy thing,
Yeah,
which you would never have seen if you didn't have
yeah.
Hideo Kojima putting in decades of work
Hmm.
again at Konami. I don't know why this
Something's
keeps
wrong with
being,
Konami.
or something's really right with Konami because they keep putting out amazing
Maybe it
individuals.
was something used to be right with Konami, and now,
There we go.
yeah, yeah. So, some things that we feel have changed over the years. Do you want to go into your first point?
Oh yeah, that they. So what kind of gets me the most about the AAA games is that they don't take any risks.
Yeah,
You know,
pretty much next to nothing.
and games are basically formulaic. I mean, I mentioned earlier that if you're buying a game from Ubisoft,
Yeah.
you're basically getting you. It's a sandbox
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of bonus stuff and a whole bunch of distractions,
Yep.
and then a story that's like 10 to 20 hours long,
Yeah. Whereas like
and you're gonna get another one next year.
Whereas, like, I feel that, like, the Final Fantasy series, for example, if you look at the differences between 1 to 9, they're fairly drastic.
Yeah,
Maybe not the first three of them because they were sort of similar, but, like, for the most part, they're fairly drastically different. And then once you got to 10, that obviously was another drastic step, but then they started, like, basically rehashing a lot of the same and similar content where there was like sidequels and sequels and prequels and all this other stuff for the exact same thing. Like 13 is a good example of that as well. And there's 10 part 2 and
I, yeah,
Final
13,
Fantasy
13
part
2,
6
and
like
then Lightning Returns,
yeah.
unofficial 13-3. It was like it's like First Blood Part 2.
Yeah, that was like a platinum game style action game.
I think so.
Yeah.
I didn't play it.
Fair enough.
Uh,
I don't think I've played it either. I don't remember it anyway. But
but yeah,
yeah.
that kind of, I think that hits me the most. Like uh, it's something that we don't see a ton of
Mhm.
in any form of media, but it's not very often that you see a strong female lead.
Mhm.
This is 2019, people.
Yeah.
Lara Croft doesn't need to be the only lady in video games.
Yeah. Yeah, Lara Croft and Samus, I guess.
yeah, and like, I mean, Samus, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
Well, by Super Metroid, you would have had to kind of known.
I mean, okay, yes, but like an outside person looking in isn't just like,
A
oh,
person and a robot. It's
that's
like,
a real nice lady in a robot costume there.
mm-hmm.
No, it's or in a space suit. Uh,
It's kind of
yeah,
both.
no, but like you don't see a ton of that.
Yeah.
You can only name a handful of like female leads in video games.
Yeah.
That aren't do something about it. God damn it.
Mm.
I'm done. I can handle it.
Yeah.
But no, like that's something that kind of hits me the most. You had a couple others that were a little bit more on the
So, quicken release dates, which is freaking annoying, EA.
and Ubisoft. I don't need an ass creed every year.
Yeah, but then they have so many people that it's like development team 1 and development team 2, and they kind of like switch back and forth. And
I still don't need one every year. I don't.
yeah.
Because what I end up getting is one that you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is real. Or no, what you get is one that's like, this is kind of like a tech demo. And then you get another one following it up, and you're like, oh, okay, you polished all that stuff from that tech demo, and now it actually is kind of a game.
Yeah.
And then the next year, you're like, wait a minute.
But
This is like a tech demo for something else.
which is kind of
What's going on?
Which is kind of like
Bam, new game that's actually kind of okay.
which is kind of annoying and funny at the same time because it's like one of our points is you know what you're getting, right?
I mean, yes.
So, yeah, but quick release dates are annoying, especially since things just don't get tested. And
Yeah.
developer abuse. There's been a lot of stories exposed and things about certain companies and things that have happened and that do happen in the industry. And this happens in indie game companies as well. But I think it probably happens a little bit more in AAA games just because they're less prone to basically saying, okay, we're gonna wait like 6 months or a year or something like that to release the game.
Yeah,
Because
that the whole like crunch culture has
yeah,
been there's been a ton of focus on that
yeah.
lately because it's finally come out.
hmm and my biggest point is basically incomplete products being released. Last few points, I guess. The things that I think like the most about the indie games.
The
Um,
AAA games.
sorry, yeah, the AAA games are bringing the continual content from IPs that we love. As long as they continue to do well, this will stand true. But my example of that is the Dragon Age series. Like it unfortunately, I understand that Inquisition apparently had a lot of developer crunch that was pretty toxic, but it was a good game. But
I mean, you do still get triple A games coming from studios that
mhm,
even though crunch culture exists,
yeah,
that aren't delivering content um, every single year.
mhm,
You know, you have somebody like Rockstar
yep.
who, you know, you're gonna have 5 years between
And
releases.
I find that they do it right because they will release like a core game like Grand Theft Auto 5, and then that'll be kind of like their core single player content. And then after they've done that, they'll be like, oh, like here's a multiplayer version of it. It's the exact same thing, but it's all online and stuff like that with like
Yep.
online features. And it's like that's the smart way of doing it because you actually make a core product that you develop over a few years and you get it right and then you build up that extra content because so many people have bought in your games, but unfortunately not every company does that.
And what's been interesting about the Rockstar releases, not to get way off topic here,
hmm
but we've had Grand Theft Auto 5 and we've had Red Dead Redemption
yep
2. Those have been their only releases in 10 years.
yeah, definitely a few years at the
It's
least.
been quite a while, and I remember GTA 5 releasing on the 360,
hmm
and it was like a month later that the online component released, and it was so broken.
yeah,
It wasn't it wasn't anything, but I didn't feel cheated
right,
that it wasn't functional.
because there's added content after the fact.
Yeah, like I had already finished the story. There was still extra content that I could go back into the single player mode
Yeah.
to do, and then you know they kind of put out this beta of the multiplayer.
hmm
It was busted. They worked on it. They figured out the issues, and then they released this like fairly robust single player or multiplayer um, game
hmm
with lots of stuff to do,
yeah, and
and
tons of people love and play it now.
yeah,
There's
and
like tons of people who like play it on Twitch and on YouTube and stuff like
it's
that.
massive, and
Yep.
you've actually seen the exact same thing, or at least I've had the same experience with Red Dead Redemption 2,
hmm
where you know you have awesome single player,
yeah,
and then I dipped my toes into the multiplayer after I completed the single player campaign, and I was like, this is kind of shitty, and they actually have done a bunch of work on the multiplayer, and now you have this more realized multiplayer experience.
yeah.
So I mean, they tend to deliver on the single player aspect,
hmm
that big like cinematic experience that you're signing up for.
Yep.
You're not buying a Rockstar game. Again, it's that you know exactly what you're getting.
Yeah.
I know when I'm throwing down $80 on the counter for a Rockstar title,
hmm
I'm going to get this big cinematic experience,
Yeah,
and that's exactly what I want.
for sure.
And then they're dropping these interesting multiplayer aspects after the fact.
hmm
They're not like a lot of companies that are just like, here's everything right now. This is all it is. Oh shit, we're gonna patch a couple of things. All right, I hope you like it.
Have fun.
Um,
Maybe. Yeah.
but yeah, you do. The continuous content is really good.
Hmm.
As long as it's reasonable.
Yeah, as long as it functions and it's
Yeah.
reasonable and.
And you do get things like the Dragon Age series, the Mass Effect trilogy,
Hmm.
which I know people didn't like the third one, like didn't like the ending of the third one as much.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of controversy with that.
And Andromeda's got a lot of hate.
Hmm.
Though my wife loves it, so don't at me. But yeah, no, you're and uh, they they get they get the money to push forward the user experience.
Yeah.
You get um, you have things like Metal Gear Solid
Hmm.
for the PlayStation 1 that push that system as far as it could go.
Hmm.
And yes, it came at the end of the life cycle, but the things that you see get released after the fact are able to tap into that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a way back example,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you have studios who have the funding to push content forward,
Hmm.
and now they've done they've done the R&D. They have the new
Game engines.
yes,
Yeah, the new game engines.
they have the new game engines, which are expensive to license,
Yeah.
but there are new game engines and development tools that can be accessed and used,
Hmm.
which 10 dudes sitting around in a basement aren't going to have millions of dollars to develop a new engine.
Yeah, it's definitely
It's just
very
not
time
reasonable.
consuming. It requires very specific skill sets where they want to concentrate on them. But yeah. I guess the last point that we have on why we love AAA games is because, um, and it all comes down to the amount of funding that they have, obviously. But like these companies, visually and graphically push the boundaries of their game engines and the various consoles that are out there, pushing what we expect as a status quo for graphics, essentially. To new norms. And I'll be honest, I'm not really big on the graphics, and I never have. But if it has good graphics, I'd certainly appreciate it. The more realistic and the more beautiful that it looks, the better. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the best looking.
No, that's not a.
Yeah, it's not a requirement to me for video games. But yeah, it's kind of nice that there are these companies that are like pushing the boundaries and developing their game engines and stuff like that to set the bar and standard higher and higher. So yeah, uh, let's go into indie games and let's talk about kind of the rise of indie games because it's always been a thing, but it's not until more or less recently that indie games have kind of done a whole turnaround where they've become more prominent in today's society, where like you're almost getting as many indie games as you are getting full like
Oh my God, you're
triple A
getting
games.
like you get an indie release like every minute.
Yeah, yeah,
Not to get like.
and the bad part of this is that we do get a lot more shovelware, like especially on the Steam store and stuff like that, and a little bit on like GOG store, and I'm assuming eventually on Epic Games and everywhere where
It's
else.
probably not on Epic Store.
Yeah,
Hopefully not on Epic Store.
I don't know how you'd find it without a search feature, but
Or
and
without companies willing to commit. But anyways, um, no, the accessibility of the content has really been the change there.
hmm.
You had I guess it would be the Xbox Live Arcade
Yeah.
was really the big driving force between it and behind it.
Hmm.
And again, that gets us a little back into um, the like major companies being able to afford publishing.
Yeah.
So you have like Microsoft, who's like they were just throwing money at stuff.
Hmm.
I think that's how everybody has a copy of Super Meat Boy at this point.
Yeah.
because they just kept like that was their one of their first big indie releases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that Braid and
yep.
Fez were really the three of the big indie games that kind of happened in the early 2010s.
And that it really opened people's eyes to an experience that you could have that was not $70.
Yeah, and those games being on the Xbox Live Arcade and stuff like that kind of leads into how we have more distribution models and how that's changed over time. And we have things like the Xbox Arcade or Xbox Store and the PS Store, Steam, GOG, and everything, not just your Electronics Boutique and Walmart, for example.
Yeah,
There's
the accessibility is just insane.
yeah, it takes out a lot of the costs of the which we talked about in a previous episode with digital versus physical episode, and it just because those costs are a lot lower, companies of like 2 people or 10 people who are making an indie game actually have the availability and they don't have to have all those upfront shipping costs and
And they and like
packaging and stuff like that.
and they have the tools now to spread that cost out as well.
Yeah,
Like between things like Steam's Greenlight program,
yeah,
where you can have a game in early access for like
a year.
40 decades. That's a
Yeah,
lot of decades. But like some games you feel like are in early access forever.
yeah.
I mean, Minecraft itself was in early access for I want to say 4 years.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
It
that.
was in early access for a lot of time. It
Yeah.
like its final release was just like when it had its final release, everyone
Hmm.
was like, "Oh, okay."
We're already playing it.
Yeah, like we've been playing this forever. But you've
Yeah.
got like, Greenlight, lots like the whole
Hmm.
concept of early access. You got Kickstarter,
Yep.
or GoFundMe. Like
Yeah.
there are various ways to fund your projects now
Hmm.
that isn't just like out of pocket.
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat ramen for the next 5 years because that's all I can afford while I
Yeah.
make this project.
Hmm. And to add to that as well, not only have the distribution models changed, the game engine accessibility has become a lot easier. For example, the Unity game engine, it actually has a tiered paid service where there's like a student license where it's like next to free or it is free. There's
Oh.
if you think that you're gonna have a certain X amount in sales, then you only have to pay so much for it, and depending on how many developers you're using, you have to pay a certain amount for it and stuff like that. Versus like let's say in the 90s where if you wanted to use like Unreal like 1.1 or something like that, you would have had to pay considerably a lot more money for using that game engine, or if you were going to use like I don't know 3D Realms engine or something like that. It just seems to me at least a lot more accessible and more cost efficient for an indie company to actually get existing tools instead of having to build them from scratch.
Yeah.
A lot of them still do build things from scratch, which is great because then they can specifically cater it to the thing that they want to do the best.
Yes.
But there are tools out there that, since the industry is more mature, especially as time goes on, that the accessibility to these types of things are a lot easier. So let's go into why we think indie games are good for the industry, as we did with the AAA games. So the first point.
Uh, it's it still keeps those big guys on their toes.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it gets into what we were talking about with what we don't like about the AAA games.
Yeah.
These guys are willing to put out a fully realized story at prices that are just not completable by them.
Yeah.
You're gonna get like not with everything. Not
Mm-hmm.
every indie release is $20.
Yeah, or $5. Some of
Yeah,
them are like $35 and stuff like that. But
absolutely.
'cause I
And
think even
and
No Man's Sky was like $50 or something like that, wasn't it?
No Man's Sky was a full 70
Oh, was
bones.
it
Like it
70?
was
Okay. I thought it was like 50 on PC, but like 70 on the
it
consoles.
might have been the
Yeah.
case. I mean, I paid
You're,
$70 for it when it
regardless,
came
yeah.
out, and I was disappointed when it came out. But again,
You and a lot of people.
well, yeah, but they worked at it.
Mm-hmm.
They heard the complaints. They went dark, which was a
Not a good
mistake.
thing. It's always a bad thing, BioWare. But
But yeah,
yeah,
like, they took the time and righted their mistake because they're a small team,
yeah,
and they're real people, not a corporation.
yeah.
And real people tend to have, morals and integrity, whereas a big corporation doesn't.
Hmm.
A big company doesn't have a moral compass. They have stockholders and or
Yep.
shareholders
Hmm.
um and stock prices
Yeah,
and corporate overlords.
their duty is to the shareholders,
Yeah.
not to the gamers. Unfortunately, they'll say that they want to appease gamers, and certainly they do, because we won't buy those games if
They want
they'll
to appease us
betray
because
us.
they want to keep selling product to
Yeah,
us.
but yeah, they have dividends and stuff to pay, I guess. But yeah. So yeah, and they're not afraid to take risks and cover content that AAA companies feel would hurt sales, as you mentioned before, with the diversity issue, especially with like non-male protagonists,
Yeah.
and even being a problem for some companies like Don't Nod, who didn't want a male lead. And yeah, it just, they go over different content that you might not necessarily see, like depression or anxiety, or like even
Mental
transgender mental
yeah.
disorders,
Like
or
mental illness.
hmm
I mean, it was a bigger release, but
yeah,
like Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice was a real great example of um like mental health issues.
yeah,
And someone having a very obvious breakdown.
hmm
Um and they illustrated it in a beautiful manner. Uh Told an amazing story over 8 hours.
yeah. It was like, yeah, 5 to 10 hours for sure.
Beautifully rendered.
That
Like,
game's graphics are amazing.
yeah, and at $35.
Hmm. Which is a little bit more pricey on like the more indie title, but it's, yeah,
It's $35.
it
And
definitely was priced correctly, I
an
think.
8 hour story.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't want to shit on it too hard because I really loved it, but Uncharted 4 was 15 hours,
Yeah.
and that was 75 bucks or $80.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I can't. Even the previous Uncharted games, like Uncharted 3 and 2, were probably around the 8 hour mark.
Yeah, I think 1 to 3 are like 7 to 8 hours.
Yeah, and those were full price release.
Hmm.
Like they were, yeah.
In my
Like,
opinion, worth it, but
I mean, yeah, 100%. Like they were great games. Like I don't want to like trash on them or anything, but like
I know, definitely make more games, Naughty Dog.
you do like you get these independent companies that are like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, you can do these beautiful things and release them at these huge points.
Yeah.
But here's something that, okay, we're not spending millions of dollars on marketing.
Yeah.
We're hoping that people will play it. I'm sure um, they sent out codes to reviewers and
Yep.
whatever, and got in the hands of people and hope that they would be the ones to market it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really helps the indie games being cheaper really helps consumers to an extent by being cheaper, because it allows us to basically play more games, because that's what every gamer wants to do, is play more games.
Yeah, again,
And
it's something that we mentioned in the previous episode about digital content.
yeah.
Whereas I will 100% roll the dice on a game that's $5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I'm not usually gonna roll the dice on an $80 game.
No.
I'm not gonna be like,
You're definitely
maybe
going to
this
be
is good.
watching other Let's Players or
Yeah,
reviewers or Twitch and stuff like that to see, like, is this what I want? Especially if it's something that you haven't played before, where you might not do that if you're just a Call of Duty fan. You're like, yep, getting the next one, right? Like, that's what I do to Dragon Age. Like, yep, I'm
yeah.
getting the next one, right? So,
But if it's something
s-
new, you know what? Even if it's not something new,
mhm,
even I love Assassin's Creed, I really do, but I haven't enjoyed the last games as much.
yeah,
And I really watch. Like I picked up Odyssey right away because I'm like, oh, not Odyssey, Origins.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, new Assassin's Creed. Looks different. I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
And it didn't grab me. It did not grab me. So I actually really waited on Odyssey. And I
Right.
got so many different opinions, and I think I still even like picked it up on sale
Yeah.
because I just didn't want to take the risk. I didn't want
Right.
to get something at that price point that I was going to be disappointed in.
Yeah. This is one of my main points on why I really like indie games the most. Is because I find that they focus on one or two things, as I mentioned earlier, and focus on it and excel at it. Versus if you take a game that's a AAA game, in most of those cases, they do everything fairly well. They have the graphics, they have the story, they have the
I mean,
gameplay.
sometimes they have the story.
Yeah, but like
Yeah,
generally they're doing as good of a job on all of these things, um, and they're not really super excelling at anything. Whereas if you take an indie game, for example, they generally take a core concept such as a game mechanic. Maybe it's puzzling, or maybe it's just story and character development, or maybe it's music, a rhythm or something like that. And then they take one or two of these things that they can basically spend 90% of their time on, and then 10% of their time on other things to basically complete the game. And then it's like more of a unique experience. Yeah, and that's the reason why I like really like these indie games, because like or anything essentially with anything non AAA, because those types of enhancements on the focusing of like story, for example, or on music and everything, um, is just a lot better. I
it's true.
find,
You
yeah.
tend to talk like when you're talking about indies as opposed to talking about a AAA release,
Hmm.
you're typically focused on one or two aspects.
Yeah,
You know, like
like
if I come to you and I'm like, "Oh man, I played this really great game that I picked up uh on Switch,
hmm
most likely from the eShop."
yep, like
I'm
Bubba is You.
yeah,
The
when it
graphics aren't that great, but the
nope.
gameplay and the puzzle
The
of it,
the
that's what
puzzle
they
elements
focused
were
on.
amazing.
Yeah,
It was so like and it was something that forced you to really think outside the box,
yeah,
and that was like not something that was any I mean, accounting plus on PSVR. It's
hmm
just accounting on the other. I think they might be the plus version,
right,
but it was basically developed at like a game jam
yeah,
where Justin Roiland had messaged some people and was like, "Hey, I hear people are like making games. Does anyone want to make a VR game with me? Because I'd like to make a game." And so they make this really dumb game,
right,
but the all of the dialogue was just so insane and hilarious.
hmm
Um, yeah, like it was just so much fun to play because all of the dumb stuff that were incorporated into it.
yeah,
Whereas like if I'm gonna talk to you about Call of Duty, I'm gonna be like, man, then I shot the dude and it was cool.
yep. Like KDA is up.
Yay. But like when I talk to you about Oxenfree,
hmm
um,
I'm talking about the
I
music and
was
the storytelling.
yeah.
Yeah, you're not
I'm
really
just
talking
like
like the graphics were cool. They weren't the like well, yeah,
yeah,
they
I
were
mean the graphics were
unique. You
kind of
know what I
cool,
mean?
but they
Yeah.
weren't like
They didn't look like Senua Sacrifice, right? Because like
no.
that's what Hellblade: Senua Sacrifice concentrated on, was the graphics, that was hyper realism, right?
Yeah.
And whereas it was just like they had, you know, only one person working on all the art assets for Oxenfree,
Yeah.
and did a very great job. But you know, it's a different art style. They take what they have and they make it work.
Yeah.
Apparently, all in Photoshop.
Well, but like you actually talk about a specific thing
Hmm.
when you're talking about an indie release.
Yeah.
I at least find that that's kind of the case. You're not usually saying like, generic things about it.
Yeah.
It is very specific
Yep.
to your point.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, another reason why I really love indie games is because they tend to revitalize stale genres, and add new aspects to them specifically. A few examples of this are Hammerwatch, which is a rogue-based game that's kind of like Gauntlet. The style of game that Gauntlet is has always kind of been around, and many of these games have always been around for all of our examples. But it kind of like revitalized them, where all of a sudden you started getting like Enter the Gungeon and Hammerwatch and all these other things, right? I don't really know where it started to become more popular, but it's just an example of like an old stale genre having new added neat aspects to it. For example,
and
online multiplayer.
and now the rogue genre is new and stale.
Yep. And Legend of Grimrock is another great example because it's the 3D first person aspect dungeon crawl RPG, which were really, really popular in the 80s and early 90s. Up until kind of the Infinity Engine games started coming out, and then they kind of like went away, and there were a few of them still around. And now you're seeing, since that game be released, oh, this is a thing. Might and Magic 10 Legacy came out, and all these other games and stuff like that. Yeah, and the Game Dev Tycoon, which is a simulation style game that's really similar to games that were around in the mid to late 90s. That
Yeah, you just don't really see a lot of those anymore. But now you're starting to actually see
Yep.
more again.
Yeah, exactly. And it also reaches niche genres. Cuphead is an excellent example of this. Run and gun games are very, very popular in the late 80s to mid 90s. They've always been around, and they probably won't go away, which is good. But because I
If you like
love my
them.
run and gun games. But yeah, it's a game that was in development for a really long time by very few people. Um,
Yeah.
and and yeah, they took a niche genre and they ran with it and made a really great run and gun game because it doesn't appease everybody. There's a lot of people who hate that game where it's just like, oh, it's too hard, make it easier. It's like, sorry, you missed the point.
But the
Right?
thing, like, again, like to your previous point, when you're selling Cuphead to somebody, you're talking about the art style.
Yeah.
You're talking about the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Those are
Yeah,
the
the I think
biggest
music is
biggest.
kind of always an underlying thing that's always kind of really cool in indie games.
That's true. Indie games
But
tend to
yeah,
have better
the game,
soundtracks.
the gameplay and the art style is really, I think, the two of the large things in that game that they really concentrated on.
Yeah, the art style is just amazing.
Hmm.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Another example of reaching niche genres is A Hat in Time. The Nintendo 64 era, everybody started to love like Banjo Kazooie and all those others type of collectathon games, and that's exactly what this is. It's a 3D platformer collectathon game that's amazing. And if you haven't played it and you love those types of games, I definitely recommend that you check that out. Another one that you're excited that I put on this list was Deponia.
Yeah, because point and click adventures are fantastic.
Yeah, and those were very exclusively a 90s thing, and
Yeah.
they've always been around, but like that's an example of one of them that have come back ever since this resurgence of these indie companies making these point and click adventure games. And yeah, because you have old great games like Dreamfall and Monkey Island,
Monkey Island.
and yeah, it's a cool game.
Yeah,
And
and you're starting to see more of them come out. I mean, we actually went full circle because
mhm,
thanks to, kind of stuff like that, you get Broken Age,
yep.
which is another point and click adventure from Tim Schafer, who made Monkey Island, which was one of the best
Yeah.
point and click adventure games in the 90s.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, you get all the way back. And yeah, like we said before, um oh geez.
You had one example that you wanted to bring
Sorry.
up.
I did. American Fugitive,
Yep.
which I talked about a lot earlier,
Hmm.
which wasn't necessarily the catalyst, but you get that like OG GTA gameplay,
Yeah.
which not something you find every day.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
because
like
that original Grand Theft Auto was very unique whenever it first came out. and it hit kind of like the gaming industry by storm because it was very unique. It was similar to some other aspect ratios of like some of the RTS games and stuff like that, but it
Yeah,
was more like fast paced and it had its own unique element to it and
and
stuff like that, which
it
made it really fun.
it didn't take itself incredibly seriously,
Yeah.
but it wasn't jokey.
Mhm.
And that's the important thing here because, we've got like Retro City Rampage and Hawaii Shakedown,
Yep.
which do not in any way, shape, or form take themselves seriously and do have a similar gameplay loop.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a little bit more serious storytelling and kind of in line with the way that GTA used to present their stories.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same gameplay. It's that top-down driving, shooting,
Yep.
stealing. Yeah, it's not something that you see a ton of every day.
Yeah.
Just like a point-and-click adventure game.
So yeah, that sums up aspects of indie games, and we kind of wanted to end up on a note of what we'd like to see moving forward in the industry, I guess, as a whole. And we would like to see indie games kind of branch out and not stay comfortable. And by what we mean by that is like these companies have who are very small teams. They've released one product, and a lot of them are kind of falling um, to the same traps that the AAA companies are have fallen into, where this like, okay, we've made this game, let's do the same thing again,
Yeah,
and let's do the same thing again.
here's the sequel, even though it's going to take longer
Yeah.
to come out.
And it'd be like you started by being like very high risk and having good reward with it, and it's just like kind of like the guys who did The Legend of Grimrock 1 and 2. They were pretty similar games. One was inside, one was outside. That was its change. But then the third game, Druidstone, they actually made a very different game for Druidstone, and it's not the same thing. And if more companies did stuff like that, where it's still an RPG, but it's a lot different. It's like more tactical. It's combat on a grid and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I haven't played it too much, so I won't speak too much to it, but it is a very different game than the 3D first person perspective like dungeon crawl. And if more companies did that instead of like doing, I don't know, Crypt of the Necrodancer, Crypt of the Necrodancer 2, Crypt of the Necrodancer expansion pack, Nintendo.
They only did 2.
Sure, there's like 3
He's
expansion
just
packs to
grumpy
that.
about it. He's just grumpy about
Okay,
it.
make a different rhythm game. It'd be awesome.
But no,
I'm sure they will.
I
But
see your point because there was like there was a sequel to Hammerwatch, wasn't there?
yep.
And it was fairly similar to the first.
Yeah, it was just different like areas. Like the first one was very geez, it's been a while since I played it, but it was very like the themes of the areas were totally different. So like there's like desert areas and stuff like that, and forest areas and stuff in the second one. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, like, yeah,
new
you
classes, new
keep
mechanics.
pushing
Definitely keep pushing.
to fall back. I mean, the same people who did Inside or Limbo did Inside, which
They're very similar.
they are very
They're
similar. I
very-
mean,
They're different in a little bit, yes. And most of these games, to all of the indie games' defenses, they are different to certain elements, but they're very, very similar. It's not like Square saying, "Okay, I'm going to make Parasite Eve," right? It's like it's still an
yeah.
RPG, but it's not Final Fantasy. You know what I mean? Like it's be a little bit more risk averse.
And I mean, like Parasite Eve was considerably different.
Yeah, it was
You
very
know, that
different.
was a big step away.
Yeah, that was their take on the whole Resident Evil Alone in the Dark, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that, like that's like just what you were saying. You know,
Mhm.
you want these guys to push past. I don't need another rogue game.
Yeah.
I don't. They're fun and I've enjoyed playing the ones that I've played, but not everything needs to be some kind of rogue Metroidvania style.
Yeah, one of those two. There's
like
so many
that's
of them.
or it's some incorporation of those two things
Yeah.
shoved together.
And love those genres, obviously.
Yeah.
We're not saying don't make them at all. It's just,
No, I can't wait for my my next Bloodstained.
Yeah.
But it's it doesn't need to be every other release.
Hmm.
You know,
And on top of that, we want to see the AAA guys be more risk averse. Or sorry,
or
take
less risk
less risk averse.
averse.
Sorry,
Take more
take
risks.
more risks. Yeah, don't be afraid to postpone games. Like, do a better job. Like, bring back some of the classic genres. What we talked.
Actually have some representation
Yeah.
in like AAA content.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a female lead. You know, tell stories that are risky.
Yeah. Yeah, and do new gaming mechanics or match hybrid mechanics together. Like there's a game series called Spellforce, which is a hybrid genre of RTS and RPG, which is a really, really great game series. The third one actually just came out fairly recently, and it's an amazing game. And if more companies made these hybrid genre games that just are more unique and stuff like that, that are risks, then I think players would really, really enjoy them. It's just that they have to realize that there are people out there who will play them. Just, figure out how to market to them and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take that chance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, and just
Stop making fucking cell phone games.
yeah,
Like,
with
don't stop
monetization.
don't stop making cell phone games. That's fine. Just like stop making our core video games basically cell phone games.
Just
Because
ways to suck money out of us continuously.
yeah, we got enough of that in League.
Yeah.
I play video games on consoles and PC and everywhere for both multiplayer and single player content, and it's disappearing. And the large companies are just not making enough of it. And yeah, I can get that through indie games, but I also want to get that through single player.
Yeah.
And Sony has proven with God of War and publishing Uncharted games and The Last of Us, the single player content is viable.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of good single player games that are coming out, and it's just kind of sad that EA Games cancels a Star Wars game because it is single player and that's not what's selling.
Yeah,
Screw
but
you.
it is.
I want that Star Wars game back. I know we're getting one finally, but I wanted the one where the author of from Naughty Dog is working on a Star Wars game.
And
I was
now
so
not
excited
anymore.
for that. It's not even happening anymore. Oh, so frustrated. But yeah.
Take risks.
Take risks.
Do it.
Yeah. But that ends our episode. And if you made it this far and you're not subscribed, give us a like and a subscribe.
Wait, subscribe first and then like the video.
That doesn't matter.
Or like the video and then subscribe. You know what? I'm not your boss. You do whatever you want to do.
You do you.
But if you do either of those things and you want to be notified about the content, feel free to click on the little notification bell.
Yep. And share it with your friends who think that the content would be enjoyable. Anyway,
we'll see you next week.
Yeah.